The HOA president was screaming, "Arrest him," while I was standing waist-deep in freezing water on my own damn lake. It's 6 a.m., mist still sitting low over Willowbend Lake, my little aluminum boat rocking gently at the end of my wooden ramp, and I'm there in leaky waders, hands on the bow rope, when Brenda Lockwood comes storming down my dock like she just bought the entire shoreline at auction. Her perfect red manicure stops inches from my nose. Perfume so strong it's fighting with the smell of wet pine and outboard fuel, and she shrieks, "Trespasser! Illegal boat launch! Deputy, put him in cuffs right now." The poor deputy looks from her to me, to the house behind me, back to her again, trying to figure out why he's being dragged into a reality show at dawn. "Officer," I say, water dripping off my jacket. "This is my property, my dock, my boat, my lake rights." "Not anymore," Brenda snaps, spit flying. "The Harbor Point Lakeside Association owns this shoreline now, and you are in violation of community water use regulations." 10 seconds later, cold metal closes around my wrists while my 12-foot aluminum boat bobs beside us like some confused steel duck. And up on the decks around the cove, at least 15 neighbors are standing with coffee cups and phones out, filming the HOA president having a meltdown at sunrise. Here's the twist. 10 minutes after those cuffs clicked shut, I legally owned her precious Marina. My name is Liam Parker, and this war started long before the handcuffs, before the deputy, before Brenda turned my life into lakefront court drama. 15 years ago, my wife Emily and I bought 12 acres at the quiet end of Willowbend Lake, complete with full, recorded water rights, a tired little cottage, and a strip of shoreline that looked like peace carved into earth. Every morning we took our coffee to the dock, listened to the loons, watched the fog burn off while her lavender shampoo mixed with the smell of wet wood. 3 years ago, cancer took Emily, and that dock became the only place my head stopped spinning. Me and my German Shepherd Jasper out on that same rickety aluminum boat at 5 a.m., lying in the water, watching the light rise, trying not to drown in everything I'd lost. That boat ramp wasn't unauthorized maritime infrastructure. It was my lifeline. Then 6 months ago, Brenda Lockwood seized the HOA presidency over Harbor Point Estates like she was storming a small country. Picture this woman, mid-50s, razor-sharp bob, white BMW SUV that she drives like a tank, always dressed like she's about to close a hostile corporate takeover, even when it's just a neighbor's barbecue. Previously served on city council until the voters collectively decided they'd had enough. Within a week of her coronation, violation notices tripled. Christmas lights on January 2nd? Fine. Dog barking during the afternoon? Fine. Garden gnome facing the street instead of the house? Don't even ask. I kept my head down, paid my dues, kept the property tidy, figured she'd burn out harassing people with plastic flamingos before she ever got around to me. That was my mistake. The declaration of war came by certified mail on a rainy Tuesday. Thick cream paper with the Harbor Point Lakeside Association logo at the top, Brenda's dramatic signature at the bottom, and in the middle, a $500 fine for unauthorized watercraft storage and visual pollution inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. In plain English, my dock and little boat launch, the same one that existed when I bought the house, had suddenly become a threat to premium market positioning. Attached was a second letter, printed on offensively pink stationery that reeked of department store perfume, declaring that my dock area was now common HOA shoreline and must be removed within 30 days. I called her, still dumb enough to believe in conversation. "Mrs. Lockwood, this is Liam Parker on Lakeshore Lane. There's got to be a mistake about my ramp." "No mistake," she said, voice cold enough to freeze the lake. "The board unanimously determined individual launches lower property values. You have 30 days to remove all structures or face escalating penalties." "I own the water rights," I told her. "They're written directly into my deed. The HOA supersedes individual usage when the community's welfare is at stake," she snapped. "This matter is closed. Do not contact me again." Click. I sat there staring at the phone while Jasper looked up like, did she really just say that? She had no idea what she just poked. 3 days later, a notice appeared on my door. Emergency board meeting, mandatory for all waterfront owners, at the Harbor Point Community Center. I walked in expecting a dozen people, found over 40 crammed into metal chairs under humming fluorescent lights, the room smelling like burned coffee and industrial cleaner, Brenda was on a little stage behind a folding table, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my boat. To her right sat Evan Lockwood, her nervous lawyer nephew who kept tugging at his tie like it was strangling him. "We're here to address a serious threat to our property values," Brenda announced, and then gestured at me as if she were pointing at a mugshot. "Mr. Liam Parker has constructed unauthorized maritime infrastructure encroaching on common HOA water, creating liability for every homeowner." Evan then rolled out a fresh survey map showing my dock magically reaching 15 feet into HOA-controlled lake, a completely different picture than the survey I had in my safe. I stood, pulled out Emily's meticulously filed 2009 survey and original deed, laid them right on Brenda's table. My documents showed water rights extending 200 feet out, my dock reaching barely 30. "Ma'am," I said, "this isn't just some rickety platform. This is rightfully mine." Evan looked at my paperwork and went pale. "Surveys can become outdated," Brenda snapped, her voice cracking slightly. "Boundaries evolve as communities develop." That's when my 78-year-old neighbor Mrs. Agnes Caldwell stood up, steady as a lighthouse. "Jake, sorry, Liam, has been using that dock since before this HOA even existed," she said. "My husband and I watched him build it. We launched our own boat there." Across the room, Mark Jensen raised a hand. "He let us launch when the county ramp was closed last summer, too." The narrative was slipping out of Brenda's hands, and you could see the red blotches blooming up her neck. She shifted tactics, dragged insurance into it, claimed my dock turned all of them into walking lawsuits, said previous boards were negligent, and she was the first one brave enough to protect them. Then she slammed down the gavel and pronounced sentence. I had 30 days to tear everything out or face legal action and attorney fees. The meeting ended in awkward scraping chairs and people suddenly fascinated with their shoes. War was officially on. The following Monday, I stepped out with my coffee and found a security truck idling by the water. Inside, in a crisp uniform that still had fold lines, sat Kyle Mercer, Brenda's famously unemployed son-in-law, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge. "Morning," I called in my bathrobe. "You lost?" "I'm here on lakefront patrol for the Harbor Point Lakeside Association," Kyle said, trying for official and landing somewhere near high school hall monitor. "Your dock's been designated a violation zone requiring daily monitoring." Behind him, bright yellow, "No trespassing." HOA property signs had been hammered into dirt I'd paid for, on a shoreline deeded directly to me. Over the next week, he showed up every morning at 6 a.m., parking in the one spot that blocked my path to the ramp, jotting angry notes while I tried to load my tackle box like I was committing crimes with every worm I touched. While Kyle played security cosplay, I spent my afternoons in the county recorder's office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and humming copy machines. That's where I met Janice Howard, a clerk who'd been filing HOA paperwork since fax machines were cutting edge. "Sweetheart, you look like you're ready to fight somebody," she said, sliding a stack of Harbor Point filings across the counter. "I might," I admitted. She flipped through a folder, frowned, and lowered her voice. "You might want to see this," Janice whispered, pushing me a manila envelope. Inside were the documents from Brenda's election, notices sent regular mail to maybe half the community, no certified receipts, no proper notarization, all for an office that, by state law, required 30 days certified notice to every homeowner. In other words, Brenda hadn't just been obnoxious. She hadn't even been legally elected. "I've seen a lot of messy boards," Janice said. "But this one, she cut corners like it was a sport. I copied everything." Meanwhile, Kyle escalated from measuring my dock posts to following me around the yard, scribbling notes anytime I touched so much as a rope. At the same time, Brenda hosted little coffee chats at her place, feeding new residents stories about my fragile mental state after Emily's death, posting anonymous, concerned neighbor messages online suggesting I might be unstable. Some folks who barely knew me started crossing the street when they saw me coming with Jasper. Then she made her big move. One morning, I watched her march with a small entourage toward Marina at the public end of the lake. Alongside her walked Evan, Kyle, and two strangers in business casual. 20 minutes later, she walked out hugging a folder like a trophy. I got the details that afternoon from Logan Mercer, Kyle's cousin and a dockhand at the marina. "She just offered Sam Mallory 50 grand, Logan whispered, glancing around my driveway. Exclusive launch rights. HOA members only. All paid from some emergency fund. It clicked. If she controlled the only other launch on the lake, my dock would suddenly look like an outlaw outpost to everyone. She could say, use our private HOA Marina, unless you're that problem on the far shore. But there was a flaw Brenda hadn't considered. I visited Mrs. Caldwell, whose living room smelled like jasmine tea and old photographs, pulled out photo albums and original flyers from when Harbor Point Estates was first built. There, in faded newsprint from 1994, was a headline. New Lake Community guarantees water access for all residents. Her late husband, who'd sat on the original planning committee, had circled a paragraph in red. Permanent lake access for every homeowner. Covenants promising launch rights in perpetuity. She looked me dead in the eye. That woman is trying to steal what we all paid for, Mrs. Caldwell said. Of course I'll testify. Back at the recorder's office, I asked Janice for the original development covenants. She disappeared into the basement and returned with a dust-covered binder from Lakeshore Communities Ltd. Buried in legal text was exactly what I hoped for. Guaranteed water rights to original lot owners, including dock construction and boat launching, plus a separate section on Mallory Marina. And there, on page 12, was the jackpot. The marina's lease was for 25 years, expiring December 31st, 2022, with a clause stating that, if not renewed, the property reverted to county control for tax purposes until a new owner stepped in. It was now 2 years past that date. Mallory Marina was technically operating on expired paper, and the county had every right to auction it for unpaid taxes. How much are we talking? I asked. Janice did some quick math, about 12 grand in back taxes and penalties. The county's next tax auction? 3 days away. I walked out of that office with my heart pounding, not from fear this time, but from the insane possibility that a widower with a fishing habit might buy the one asset Brenda needed to control the lake. I called Dana Collins, an HOA specialist attorney who'd made a career out of dismantling petty regimes, and laid out everything on her antique desk. Invalid election, emergency fund misuse, expired marina lease, original lake covenants. This is gorgeous, Dana said, smiling like a shark. She's broken more rules than I can count. But buying Mallory Marina? She tapped the lease page. That's checkmate. At First Horizon Bank, where I'd banked for 20 years, Michael Tran, the president, listened as I explained why I wanted to pull $30,000 from my retirement to buy a beat-up marina at a tax sale. Liam, he said, half laughing. I've seen HOAs try to grab golf courses and pools, but going after the only boat launch? I hope you get it. He personally made sure my certified check would be ready Friday at 10 a.m. Then my phone rang again. Karen Holt, County Commissioner. Mr. Parker, I hear you're interested in the Mallory parcel, she said. We've wanted that resolved for 2 years. The current operator never renewed. No one else has inquired. If you're serious, 12,000 should win it. That night, a handful of longtime neighbors gathered at my kitchen table. Mark Jensen, Mrs. Caldwell, the Mercer family from up the hill, a quiet guy named Rob Santos who slid over his own 1995 deed that mentioned lake access. We joked about being the old guard, but what we were really doing was drawing a line. They documented every harassment attempt. Dana drafted challenges to Brenda's authority, and I prepared to show up at a boring county auction and walk out owning the one thing Brenda needed most. Friday at 10 a.m., in a stale courtroom with 20 folding chairs, Karen Holt read out Parcel 47B, Mallory Marina, and opening taxes owed. I raised my hand. Nobody else moved. Going once, twice, sold to Liam Parker, she said. 5 minutes later, I owned the marina Brenda thought she'd buy with everyone's emergency fund. That's when she really started to lose it. By lunch, Dana texted me laughing. Brenda had tried to hire her to block the sale. Not realizing we were already working together, by afternoon, Kyle showed up at Mallory Marina with a clipboard and a speech about community standards, and Sam Mallory, who'd just learned he'd been operating on expired paper, looked about done with all of it. Son, this man owns the place now, Sam told Kyle. Your HOA doesn't sign my checks. The next day, Brenda herself marched down the dock in a red blazer, heels clacking like gunshots on the wood, Evan trailing behind her, already regretting life choices. You think you can hold this community hostage? She snapped, jabbing a finger at my chest. I'll have this sale overturned by Monday. Then I'll see you in court, I said. And for the first time, she saw it. I wasn't bluffing, and I wasn't alone. Her tone shifted the next morning when she showed up in designer jeans, perfume softer, voice almost gentle. Liam, we got off on the wrong foot, Brenda said. What if we drop all violations? You keep your ramp, we formalize your access in the bylaws. You agree to a reasonable schedule at the Marina? I told her I'd think about it, because while we talked, I noticed how carefully she'd set her purse between us, how angled the zipper was. Later Dana would confirm Evan had called her, worried, because his aunt was editing recordings trying to frame me as some extortionist Marina Baron. The doctored audio was the last straw for half the board. At the emergency community safety meeting she called a few days later, the room was packed. People from our lake, neighboring communities, even a local reporter, Nina Reyes, notebook ready, camera rolling. Under cold fluorescent lights, with the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air, Brenda delivered her grand speech about threats to our way of life, painted me as a manipulative widower turned lake tyrant, claimed I'd bought Mallory Marina to extort the HOA. Then she played her edited recording, chopped up phrases that made me sound like a villain in a bad crime show. It might have worked on strangers, but Mrs. Caldwell, sitting front row, stood up and said, I've listened to that man talk for 15 years. That is not how he speaks, and you cut that tape like you cut your legal notices. You could feel the room tip. I walked slowly to the front, laid the original Willowbend covenants on the table, showed the paragraph giving original owners perpetual lake access, the clause that said the HOA couldn't yank water rights on a whim, then laid down Janice's copies of the botched election notices, explaining how Brenda had never legally taken office at all. Finally, I pulled out my own phone and played the full, unedited Marina conversation. Our voices clear, no threats, just her trying to spin and me staying calm. The silence that followed was thicker than any fog I'd ever seen on that lake. And that's when Commissioner Karen Holt walked through the back door with a county sheriff's deputy. Ms. Brenda Lockwood, she said, we need to speak with you about interfering in a county tax sale and misusing association funds. The deputy served her with a cease and desist on harassment and a notice of investigation into the emergency fund. Evan quietly gathered his papers and slipped out the side, done being dragged into her mess. The Queen of Harbor Point didn't go out in handcuffs like some of these stories, but in some ways it was worse. She melted in front of 60 neighbors who finally saw who she really was, shouting about conspiracies while the people she'd intimidated for months stared back, unimpressed. By Monday, her resignation email hit everyone's inbox, full of blame and zero accountability. She moved out a month later, SUV gone from her driveway, her name quietly scrubbed from the HOA website. Kyle took a security job 2 towns over, probably relieved. Evan went back to boring contracts, and the new board, elected properly this time, slashed fines, opened the books, and decided maybe measuring garden gnomes wasn't the best use of adult lives. As for Mallory Marina, I didn't turn it into some private empire. I sat down with Sam Mallory and offered him a revenue share instead of a pink slip, promoted Logan to assistant manager, and together we rebuilt the place into what it should have always been. Clean docks, safe fuel lines, open launch access for every resident like the original covenants promised. We started the Emily Parker Memorial Kids Fishing Program, Saturday mornings at dawn, 20-plus kids learning how to bait hooks, respect the lake, and put their phones down for 5 blessed minutes. Jasper became the unofficial mascot, letting sticky hands grab his fur while parents teared up watching their kids pull in their first bluegill. The county tourism board came out, snapped photos, wrote a glowing piece, but the real win wasn't publicity or property values, though those jumped too. It was walking out at sunrise and hearing laughter echo across water that used to hold so much tension. These days, when I take Jasper out at 5 a.m., I'm not alone. A couple of neighbors cast lines beside me. Boats putter away from the marina I accidentally bought at a tax auction, and Willowbend Lake finally feels like the place Emily and I dreamed it would be. We turned something ugly into something worth keeping. So now I want to throw this to you. If your HOA, or any tiny throne someone built for themselves, started treating your home and your peace like it was theirs to control, would you roll over and hope they calm down? Or would you start digging into the documents they're counting on you never reading and fight back? Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories where everyday people stand up to petty power and actually win, hit subscribe, because revenge is fun to watch, but real justice, the kind that changes the rules for everyone. That's the part one never get tired of telling.